Who are some women that often get overlooked in history but had major contributions to society? Sandra Ford, the drug technician who first brought attention to what would become the AIDS epidemic. She knew something was up when she began receiving unusually high numbers of requests for pentamidine, an antibiotic reserved for treating pneumocystis pneumonia in seriously ill, immunocompromised patients. The patients it was being requested for were gay men who had been otherwise healthy. In a similar vein, Gao Yaoji is an elderly doctor who brought attention to the AIDS pandemic ravaging China's Henan province in the 90s. She was one of the earliest doctors in China to raise awareness and do public education on AIDS. Instead of being hailed as a hero, she was harassed in silence by the local authorities who tried to cover up the pandemic. They encouraged blood selling as a way to lift villages out of poverty, which, with unsanitized equipment, gave rise to the pandemic. Nellie Bly. She was a 1890s journalist who was given an assignment to investigate the woman's lunatic asylum on Blackwell's Island due to accusations of the mistreatment of patients. She got in there by faking insanity and getting herself committed to the asylum. And when she was finally released, she ran an expose in the New York World called 10 Days in a Madhouse that exposed the awful treatment of patients inside the asylum. This was considered a revolution in investigative journalism. Also, she read around the world in 80 days, basically decided she could do better, and went around the world in 72 days. She was also an inventor, and was one of the primary journalists to cover the suffragette movement. She's one of my favorite historical figures who doesn't get enough attention. Edit. Whoa. Thank you for the awards and upvotes. I am grateful and glad to see all the positive comments. Frances Aldham Kelly. She stopped thalidomide from getting widespread use in North America and saved countless children from life-altering birth defects. Edit. Kelsey. Not Kelly. Absolute legend. Got hired BC, they thought she was a man. Francis. Edit. To be clear, it wasn't the FDA who thought she was male. It was her first appointment at the pharmacology department at UChicago where they thought she was a man. In 1952 Dr. Virginia Apgar developed a quick, easy 5-point test that summarizes health of newborns and determined those needing emergency assistance. The Apgar score is now given to practically every newborn and helps save countless young lives and reduce infant mortality. Yes, this was such an incredible advancement. I worked in a pediatrician's office, which led to me reading a little more about her. Amazing how little she's mentioned, but most of us are literally here because of her. Marie Tharp. She created the first map of the ocean floor, which led to the discovery of tectonic plates and the theory of continental drift. What this thread has taught me is, even more than I expected, people really downplay the role of women in history. Yes, because of education and opportunity, men are historically overrepresented, but not to the degree, evidentially, which we are led to think. Inga Lehmann was a Danish seismologist. She discovered P waves, waves that reflect off of the inner core, confirming that the Earth has a solid inner core and a liquid outer core. The Allied codebreakers at places like Bletchley Park during World War II. They worked incredibly long, tedious, and stressful hours and were a major contributor to the war effort and military intelligence. But their work didn't even receive official recognition from the British government until 2009. 64 years after the war ended. Elizabeth Friedman was a huge part of the American side of the code breaking. Her and her husband were originally tasked with training a lot of the first code breakers to fight the mafia during Prohibition. Her husband was set up with official government business during the war and she was given an office of people to train. They often worked with the Bletchley Park people. Daphne Oram, first ever composer to produce electronic sound. She pioneered electronic music and led the path for music today. She even wrote a piece called Still Point that she was never able to perform live because of sexism by her peers, and she never heard it live before she died. But it was performed for the first time in 2018 using a replica of a machine Daphne had created to electronically manipulate a live orchestra. Bessie Coleman. She was a black woman who wanted to learn to fly. No one would teach her. She learned that the French would, however. So she moved to France, learned French and how to fly. Then she came back to the States and taught whoever wanted to learn. She was alive same time as Amelia Earhart and got no recognition at the time. King Tamara of Georgia. She now represents the Georgian nation in Civilization VI. But before that, not a lot of people knew about her. And whenever she is mentioned as queen. But she was given the title of king because she was recognized as an equal monarch. Her husbands didn't have any royal titles. This is an undisputed fact in Georgian historiography. IDK about Western scholars. But whenever she is mentioned on the internet or mainstream, would it be Wikipedia or a video game like Civ VI, she is denied her lawful title, and that just pisses me off. Claudette Colvin was the person who refused to get up from her bus seat during the Jim Crows in America. But she was a young woman who was pregnant out of wedlock at the time. And the black leaders decided she was not a good image of an activist. So they handpicked Rosa Parks to do the same. Colvin was only 15 when she did that too. Which is crazy to me. I definitely never did anything that brave, and was privileged enough not to have to when I was 15. According to the Wikipedia article about her, she didn't get up because she was thinking about a school paper she had just written on how local stores didn't let black people try on clothes and shoes before buying. Mary Anderson invented the windshield wiper in 1903. As soon as the patent expired, it became standard in all cars. She attempted to sell it while she had the rights to it. But most manufacturers refused to believe it was a feature of value. And it is likely her being female colored their lack of enthusiasm. Henrietta Leavitt. She was an astronomer at Harvard and discovered a type of star called a Cepheid. Cepheid stars all pulse at the same rate. That lets us know how far away they are. Because of her, we were able to determine how big the universe is, along with many more things concerning its properties. Eleanor Marx may be overlooked because of her dad. She played an important role in British trade unions, which forced the move from a 12-hour working day 6 days a week to an 8-hour day 5 days a weekend. Those extra hours to go on a walk, play Xbox, learn something new or just chill is a pretty big contribution. Rosalind Franklin, Crick and Watson got all the glory. And even the plaque at the Eagle only mentions their name. They got all the glory for literally stealing her research and then rushing to publish without actually proving the double helix structure, if I recall correctly. Elsie McGillacher, Queen of the Hurricanes. She was the world's first female to earn an aeronautical engineering degree. The two major things she did was, she designed the Maple Leaf Trainer LL, and she was to look over manufacturing operations at a Canadian factories that built the Hawker Hurricane. For Scotland, I'd say the Edinburgh 7 basically paved the way for women being allowed to get into university in the UK. Historical university sexism is a topic often brushed under the rug these days. The only reason King's College London exists is because the King was mad that University College London admitted women students and so set up a rival uni that didn't. Mary Todd Lincoln. I know she went absolutely mad, which wasn't all her fault. But she was the one who really pushed her husband, Abraham Lincoln, for those not from America, to keep moving up the political ladder. And ultimately shaped what the First Lady of the U.S. is. Not sure he would have become president without her influence. She had a lot more ambition than he did. Edit. Fun fact, she also liked to bake. Look up her recipes. Guys. Her almond cake sounded delicious and it was supposedly one of Lincoln's favorite desserts. Madam C. J. Walker developed black hair care products and marketed them through her business she founded, which ended up making her the first female self-made millionaire. Ada Lovelace. She's so awesome. For anyone that doesn't know, she effectively invented the basis for modern computer programming by observing her friend Charles Babbage's work on his analytical machine, which was effectively a calculator. She realized that it was possible to do more than just maths with it and thus establish the basis for modern computing. Henrietta Lacks. My daughter attends a school named after her. The Henrietta Lacks Health and Bioscience High School. It is a high school where all the kids attending get specialized training in medical fields of their choice. Similar concept to a trade school, but for kids interested in the medical field. Hypatia made the astrolabe, then was skinned olive by Christians. Also the circular saw was invented by a woman. Thank you. Woman whose name I do not know. The Soviet World War II female soldiers. The USSR used women in the Second World War more than any other country. I feel like this. And Russia's involvement as a whole is too overlooked in a lot of places. Edit. Replaced Russian with Soviet. I am sorry for that. Camille Claudel was a sculptor and artist who worked with Rodin. He claimed a lot of her work. Artemisia Gentila, she was a woman painter in the Renaissance with style akin to Caravaggio. She is nowhere near as well known as he. And she also painted a Judith slaying Holofernes painting. These are very brief overviews of what I remember from art school. Lots of talented women tucked away beneath the male gaze of art and history. Michelle Mouton. It's just auto racing. Not super important in the grand scheme of things, but holy shit. She was probably the best rally driver and hill climber of her era and one of the best ever. She was also very involved in innovating all-wheel drive racing and safety standards. And she raced in the Group B class, which takes a level of skill, guts, and complete disregard for safety that has never been and never will be matched. The lady that painted the lanes on the roads for the first time. She did it because she was almost in an accident one night and didn't want it to happen to anyone else. Emmy Noether. I don't understand what she did, but leading mathematicians say her work was groundbreaking. So I'll take their word for it. I don't think she is overlooked. At least not by physicists and mathematicians. Noether's theorem is widely accepted as one of the most, if not the most, important theorems of modern physics. I think in her case it's more about being too deep of a result, and not flashy enough to be catchy to people who know close to nothing of physics. And so she's not as widely known as some other people. Cecily Saunders deserves the reputation Mother Teresa has. She basically invented hospice care. Before her, doctors used to just abandon incurables to die with no palliative care. Cecily Saunders arguably eliminated more useless suffering than anyone ever. May I recommend a series of short YouTube videos by Sandy Tokesvid called Vox Talks. She is a delightful UK TV personality. And during their lockdown earlier this year she made several dozen videos. All about overlooked women in history. Lise Meitner. She is a Jewish physicist that worked with Otto Hahn in research on radioactivity. She had to flee Nazi Germany, but continued on with her work in Sweden and helped discover nuclear fission. While Hahn received the Nobel Prize for Chemistry for the discovery of nuclear fission, Meitner was also part of that research. She was also offered work with the Manhattan Project, but refused because she opposed nuclear weaponry. The element meitnerium was named for her after her death. Simone de Beauvoir was a French writer, intellectual, existentialist philosopher, political activist, feminist and social theorist. Though she did not consider herself a philosopher, she had a significant influence on both feminist existentialism and feminist theory. Excerpt from Wikipedia. Globally? Perhaps Kate Sheppard, who was a leader of the women's suffrage movement in New Zealand when New Zealand became the first country in the world to give women the right to vote. And X200B. Locally, she is acknowledged by appearing on our $10 note. But I would say globally few people would probably know of her and the impact she has had for democracies across the world. Virginia Hall has a building named after her at the CIA. She was an American woman from Baltimore who went to Europe in the 1930s, lost her leg in a shooting accident, then proceeded to become a leader in the French resistance and master of disguise, all with a wooden leg. The book A Woman of No Importance is about her and came out last year. Henrietta Lacks was the origin of an immortal cell line that was obtained from her cervical cancer in 1951. The cells are still used today in cancer research and are considered wildly important. They are referred to HeLa cells, not to be confused with what The Undertaker threw mankind off in 1998. Edited out what people are responding to instead of continually getting messages about it. One of the most famous pirates to live was Anne Bonny, who was a part of Calico Jack's crew. She was extremely skilled fighter and was feared by most. Dolores Huerta, co-founder of the United Farm Workers Union with Cesar Chavez in the 1960s. She was a civil rights activist and advocated for immigrant worker rights by boycotting white grape owners. Farm workers were exposed to insidious pesticides, poor working conditions and awful pay. Her determination has changed the landscape of working rights and influenced many to stand up against unfair treatment and discrimination. She has historically lived in the shadow of Chavez, but now can have some recognition because of her involvement in countless social justice movements. She is a civil rights icon and should get the credit she deserves. That woman who gave me a free mini popcorn chicken at KFC when I was like 9. I saved my $10 and rode my bicycle halfway across the town for that kid's meal. I still remember you and treasure that kindness till this day. That was like 14 years ago. Contributed to me showing kindness to others. Acts of kindness are often overlooked nowadays. She is a contribution. I hope she's well and happy. Livia. She was Augustus' wife and considered by many to be the main power behind the throne, as well as the reason why the Roman Principate formed as it did, which shaped history for the next 1,000 years. Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth were both incredible women. But nobody talks about the National Association of Colored Women and the amazing support they provided to those women and the civil rights movement in general.